Welcome to Capital Conversations. I'm Marty Owings. It's Tuesday, March 27th, 2012.
I'm Andi Friedel. We are going to be joined tonight by DFL Representative Erin Murphy and Republican Senator Carla Nelson, and we're going to talk all about what's going on in the legislature.
As always, we invite you to join the program by leaving us a message on our Facebook page at Minnesota Capital Conversations or tweeting us at MNCapNews. You can find us there on Twitter. Send us a message or leave us a note. We'll ask your questions and respond to your comments. Well, tonight we have Senator Carla Nelson from Rochester, representing, what district is that?
Currently, it's District 30. It's the
gonna change.
new
The new
Senate
30?
District 26.
Oh, new 26.
New Senate District
Okay.
26. It's Olmsted County, and in the new Senate District 26, and also 30 included Plainview and Elgin and Wabasha County.
Very good. And a frequent guest, we were counting the times. It's 5 appearances over the life of our program. So welcome back, Representative Erin Murphy. She represents St. Paul and District 64A.
The mighty 64.
The mighty 64. We're good with that. Welcome to you both.
Great
Thank
to be
you.
here. I think I was here as a House member one year,
Oh, good.
many years ago.
Yeah.
Well, you've graduated, or
Yes, or the upper
moved
body,
over.
they say, whatever.
Yes.
Yes.
So yesterday, we'll get right into it with the fun topic that we love the best on this program. Yesterday,
What is that?
The governor announced that a majority of Minneapolis City Council members were going to support the Vikings Stadium. So I want to know from each one of you, where do you sit on that? Erin, would you?
So, the Viking Stadium continues to make slow and somewhat steady progress. It's more one step forward, one step back. We still haven't heard the bill, in a floor debate, either House or Senate. I continue to be concerned about the use of public funds or gaming to support a Viking Stadium when so many things are being left to the future legislature, when we're borrowing from our schools to pay for education, when we're borrowing against future appropriations to balance the budget. It is hard for me to give priority to the Viking Stadium. And the last thing I'll say is I'm paying a lot of attention to how the stadium and a deal around a stadium will impact downtown St. Paul and the businesses down there and the property taxpayers. So it's moving slowly. I'm not sure we're going to get it done this session, and I'm watching on behalf of the people I represent in St. Paul.
Senator
Nelson?
Well, in the Rochester area and the areas around Rochester, there's a lot of interest in the Viking Stadium, even though it's not per se in Olmsted County. And I sit on the local government committee. We did have a hearing on the Viking Stadium. A couple of the things that were kind of, and this is, I've been pretty consistent with this for months actually. There's a couple things that were no starters for me, non-starters, and that would have been the use of general funds, the use of legacy dollars, and asking the legislature to override a referendum requirement. So those 3 things were non-starters in my book. From my understanding, those are not an issue now, and so now I really need to listen intently to the financing mechanism, and there's a lot of controversy about that. Also see how the charitable gaming folks feel about that. I will say that the Vikings do have an impact on the state. I mean, we know there's over $20 million directly into the general fund because of the income tax revenue. The University of Minnesota did a study that showed either 7 to 9 million, I forgot which, of revenue in the non-metro area, indirect revenue for every game. There's a bar and grill down the street from my house that hires 4 new waiters 4 additional waiters every time there's a game to take care of the extra business. So there's an economic impact there. We just have to make sure that we get a good deal for Minnesota. And whether it will be this session or not, it's kind of late coming to the table here that the city council members got on board, but they are, and we'll see if there's time to get something done. It's hard to say, but it's coming in pretty late at the end of the day here.
Now, I don't know, did either one of you read the edit or the opinion article from Minneapolis council members Betsy Hodges and Elizabeth Glidden in the Star Tribune yesterday?
I scanned that.
Okay. Do you, I noticed there were a couple things where you were on the same page as they, and they aren't in the majority of the ones supporting the stadium necessarily, but do you have any comment on some of their criticisms of the proposals that have come through so far?
No, I'm keeping an open mind. Like I said, right now we really need to dig into the financing mechanism. I think that's the next step. I will say, though, on the Senate side, a lot of us feel it's important that we see what the House is going to do. So the council members are on board, and we're just seeing what kind of support there is in the House at this point.
And it appears thus far to me that the House leadership in the House isn't willing to bring this to a vote. So I'm not sure that it's going to move.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, Senator. Are there enough Republican votes to get a stadium done?
Well, I don't know if there's enough Republican votes to get a stadium done because it hasn't had those hearings yet that it needs to have. I think there's certainly a will to try and make something work. We don't know if it will or not, but I'm hopeful that at least the bill gets the hearings that it should have, whether it's now or it might be next session. Certainly it's a big enough topic. There's been a lot of Minnesotans invested in this on all sides of the issue, and we certainly need a full committee process, I think.
And I always want to say that I have been most impressed with the governor's leadership on this issue. I think Minnesotans are mixed in their views about the financing of the Viking Stadium when so many priorities that are important to them are not being met. But they like the Vikings, and the Vikings are a part of Minnesota, a part of our history, a part of our culture, and I think the governor understands that, and he's willing to stake out a position and work to try and bring that through the legislature. He's hit a lot of bumps in the legislature, a lot of politics in the legislature, but I think he's been clear about his position, and I think that's really important for Minnesota.
Well, I'm just, I think, as I look back in history, these discussions and debates used to happen over big, large public works projects in our state and in our nation. And now we talk about sports teams in the same sort of way we talked about big public projects or public works. And is that a shifting of cultural ideas, do you think, in our country that we identify in our state so strongly with a sports team that these owners that are already quite wealthy by anybody's averages standard, that we would help pay or support, their fun time afternoon, Sunday, 8 games is all we get here. But from a facility, we get a lot more. I understand the jobs and all that, but
Sure.
What do you think about how that's changed?
I think it's all about, politics is all about timing. And this is the time that the Vikings are, in a sense, center stage. At other times, there's other issues that have risen to the top.
Don't you wish, sincerely, besides the political stuff,
Yes.
don't you wish we were having discussions about things that were more serious than a game, a Saturday, a Sunday, a sports? I'm not talking about whether it's the right or wrong thing to do, but it seems almost trivial when you put it in the context of history and where we should be at
Well,
this
it
point.
is.
There's
well,
so many other things going on.
There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of things going on in the legislature, and we do handle a lot of things at one time.
Sure.
Actually, the media has put the focus on the
Right,
Vikings, and
right.
so if you
Well,
want
we
to go
put
after
it
the
first to go out
media,
of the
go
way.
right ahead.
Oh, we go after
but
them,
but the fact of the matter is the legislature takes up a lot of things. For example,
Yeah.
when I was elected in 2010.
Way to turn it back on us, by the way. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
your- I
exactly.
like your
That's a
style
pivot, we
already.
call that.
That's a pivot.
It's a pivot. The fact of the matter is, though, the legislature has done a lot of major things. For example, when I was elected, we had a $6.2 billion deficit. That's what
Yeah.
the previous legislature left to us, including $1.4 billion in school shifts.
Well,
That's
it's convenient to leave the governor out of that because he
okay.
was a part of that.
But the legislature and the governor, whatever it is, that's what I walked into.
They gave you a nice
That's what we walked into.
sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where are we today? Today we have the reserves paid back, which were empty. We have the budget or the cash flow paid back,
Yeah.
and we have $318 million to the school shift paid back already. Not that
How
it's
much do we owe them? 600 or something?
well, of the part
2.4
that
billion.
was.
Oh.
So that's left over from those previous
So it's about a
legislatures.
quarter.
Yeah.
We've paid back a
Yep.
quarter.
Still a big chunk.
I think
It's a
I'm
big
gonna-
chunk, and I think it's a poor way to manage budgets. There's just no doubt about that. It's been done for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But what I did want to say, we've taken a $6 billion deficit, and now we have a $1 billion
Yeah.
surplus. So I think to say that the legislature is doing trivial things is to
Well,
be
I'm-
looking in the wrong place, quite
Well, I'm
frankly.
just picking out stadiums, picking on sports teams, but
I'd
you
like to
look like you
throw
wanna
a
say
little
something.
flag
Yeah.
on the play.
Yeah.
Right?
All right. Murphy throws a flag.
To suggest that the budget is balanced is false. We have a deficit in the next biennium. We used, the first time ever in Minnesota, borrowing against future revenue to pay for current operations. A borrowing scheme that I didn't support when Governor Pawlenty proposed it. Neither did my caucus. A borrowing scheme that I didn't propose or didn't support when we voted for it on the floor. We took a 10% shift to our schools and took it to a 40% shift to our schools in this budget. We owe our schools $2.4 billion. So to take any sort of victory lap on the budget that was passed after the special session this year is, pyrrhic in nature.
Well, Representative Murphy, I've been very clear in my conversations and in my written report. That is, in fact, I use those exact words. I said it is not time for a victory lap.
It certainly
is
is
not time for a victory lap.
Maybe she got
but
that from reading
maybe
the
so.
report.
But what we do know is it's moving in the right direction, and that is the key thing. And people can go back and argue about what was done this term, what was done last term.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is we're moving in the right direction. That's what we need to be doing.
But
Yeah, I was going to
Sen-
say, I don't think average Minnesotans care which term and who.
They do
Exactly.
not. They're
Yeah.
tired of
Well,
this
maybe
kind
they're
of
not paying
finagling.
attention.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Yep.
One of the things I was wondering about that was, okay, so you mentioned that there was a couple things paid back ahead of the shifts. What the heck's a rainy day fund for? So here's how this works, right?
Yeah.
If I get some extra money at the house, but I have my kids' school tuition to pay, the old, presentation, they're not going to let me skate and go, oh, Martin, that's okay. You put a little bit back in the bank and save that for
Yep.
a rainy day and skate on the tuition you owe. I have to pay up. Those Catholics, they'll twist your arm. They'll come
Yeah.
after you.
But
What's the
So-
story with that?
Well, statutorily, law requires that we pay back the cash flow first, then the budget reserves, and
Oh,
then the
it's
school
law that
shift.
you do
So
it
it's
in that
in
order,
law
okay.
in that order, up to statutory
Can't
limits.
you guys change the law? Aren't
That
you?
does happen here,
Yeah, well.
and it may. I will say there was a proposal this week to pay back the school shift in total, even including
how did it go?
not just the $700 million that happened under this watch, but the $1.4 billion from previous legislatures, and it was using some
You
of that
looked at her
reserve.
as if- I noticed
I
how
know.
you're doing that. That's very
Yeah,
clever, though.
and
That's
well
well played, Senator.
Well, and what the point is, and
Yeah.
it still left some money in the reserves, so more money than when we came in. But I think
Right.
that's an issue. But I do think, as a former teacher myself,
Oh, okay.
I know how important education is.
You need that money.
And well, there's a lot more than money, but you got to have the funding as well. And also,
Absolutely.
fortunately, the schools in my district were able to. There was a 10% differential in the shift between what it was before and what it is now. Fortunately, my districts were able to they did not need to borrow funds, but I know there were some that did. And fortunately, if there's any fortunate to that, we were able to put more money on the basic per pupil formula, more money than had ever been put, $50 per biennium or $150 over the biennium per pupil, new money in literacy funding. So those kind of things helped, but I was not a fan of the additional shift as well. The governor proposed 50-50.
Yeah.
The Senate came back and said, we can't do that. We'll do 60-40. It had been 70-30. We'd like to get it back to that 90-10 level where
Can we
it was
just
when I was in
agree
the
that
House. Yep.
For the rest of the show, we're just going to refer to Representative Murphy as Representative $6.4 billion deficit lady?
Oh, I don't
I
think
think
we
it's
need
fair.
to do that. I think
Look
there
there,
was
she's not.
She
yeah.
doesn't
I don't
seem
think she
amused
wants
by
to
that
take
Well,
it.
I mean, I
Yeah.
would be happy to, relitigate the past years that I've served in the legislature and the recalcitrance on the part of the Republican governor and those now in the Republican majority in terms of their unwillingness to talk about how to balance the budget in an honest way.
Those are fighting words right there, Murphy.
Well, and I'm a fighting Irish woman.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not fighting. What do you want to talk about next?
Well, what about the Minneapolis city attorney? He came out and offered an opinion stating that the charter provision is not binding on this matter. How do each of you feel about the voting on a stadium deal when the citizens of Minneapolis, I think you might have spoken to it a
Yep,
little bit.
I sure did.
When they won't have a chance, even though that they're going to be, a lot of the costs will be borne by them, they won't have a chance of voice in it. And yet we're putting so many things to the people's vote this November.
I did speak to that. I'm not interested in overriding a referendum requirement. I don't plan to get in on a fight between Minneapolis city council members and their attorneys. Certainly they can figure that out. But as far as me as a legislator, voting for
Yeah.
any type of referendum, getting rid of that. I won't do that.
Okay.
I want to just go back a little bit. The stadium deal with Arden Hills kind of fell apart. Can you tell us about that or what happened there?
I think that the initial proposal talked about the Ramsey County the taxpayers in Ramsey County supporting that. And it was really clear that the taxpayers in Ramsey County were not necessarily interested in a half-cent sales tax increase to pay for the Viking Stadium. And I think that's what unhinged that proposal. I know that the county commissioners in Ramsey County are continuing to work. I think the TCAP site would be a decent site for two reasons. One, because that is an area of land that needs cleanup, and this would provide for that, and it would create another area of industry and commerce for the metro area, and I think that would be a good thing for the Ramsey County taxpayers. But we've touched on this point a couple of times. The Vikings are a statewide asset, and asking the Ramsey County taxpayers or the Hennepin County taxpayers to foot the bill for a statewide asset that produces an economic impact across the state, an economic benefit across the state, I think is flawed. I think that's wrong. And so one of the reasons I have continued to express some concern about the siting of the location either in Minneapolis and its impact on St. Paul or in Arden Hills is that we are asking too few people to pay for a benefit that is good for all of Minnesota.
And they don't even get a voice in it.
Senator Nelson, would you support a statewide sales tax?
Most likely not, unless they wanted to give statewide the increase in property values, the increase in property tax, all of that. There is an increase of revenue that comes to the city that does host any type of major attraction like that. And I'll let them figure out, if they think it's worth it or not.
Usually for the property tax, like homeowners, that there's not a.
Well, I'm assuming that there will be increased revenue coming, or that is here because of the Vikings in some form. And so I guess that's up to the local taxpayers to figure out if they're certainly behind that or not. But I don't know that a statewide sales tax would be necessary.
So, but you'd be in support of a regional, a county sales tax?
I'm going to let the Metro people handle their affairs. I don't think they need me to pop in on that. We'll let the Metro folks figure out, what is best for them.
And I do want to be clear about
Go
one
ahead.
thing. I think that however this deal comes together, it cannot rest on the property taxpayers of Minnesota. They are paying far too much, and the elimination of the market value homestead credit in the last budget cycle has increased property taxes for rural Minnesotans, for homeowners and small businesses across the state. And we've had a track record of property taxes going up in Minnesota for the last decade, and we can't have any more of that.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about. Now, I know a lot of people won't do their own laundry, but I'll do some of my own. My house, my wife and I purchased our house at the height of the market, kind of 2005. I paid $216,000 for my modest ranch-style home in Maplewood. My property tax statement came to us in the mail this week, and my wife said, it says our house is worth $123,000 now. I owe more than my house is worth, right, at this point. But I was calculating how much my property taxes have either gone up or reduced over that time. My house value has lost 40%, but my property taxes have only gone down roughly 12% in that time. That means I've got a 28% deficit in, and I don't see any difference in services, to be honest with both of you. And I've heard it's LGA, I've heard of these other issues that Representative Murphy brought up. I guess you could say that we're a little bit upset in our household about this issue.
Yeah,
Is
I
this
think you're
a
not alone.
non-political issue,
No,
right?
no, I think you're not alone.
Or
I
is it
think,
very political?
well, some people try and make it political, but I think that doesn't serve Minnesota very well to do that. Certainly, I think all
But
of
does
us
it serve
are,
the truth? I mean,
well, the
you
truth
know.
of the matter is we had that $6 billion deficit. There were some reductions that had to be made. There was a reduction of $89 million statewide, and yet property taxes have gone up by over $400 million. So certainly part of it is due to the fact that the legislature had to do some belt tightening. The rest of it, we'll just have to let people figure out with their own electeds
But are you
what
going
happened.
through the same thing? I mean, did you get
Absolutely.
your bill and say, what the heck?
Absolutely, and not only on my home, but on my business as well. So
Okay.
I'm acutely aware of that issue.
Double is
And so,
Representative Murphy?
Yeah.
Are you
Yeah.
hearing from constituents?
I hear from constituents, but mostly I heard from my husband, Joe Faust, who's a business owner.
Yeah.
And, our property lost value again, and our property taxes went up again by another $800. So we're feeling it acutely at home as well. And this
Right.
is an artifact, if you will, of the decision-making that we've been making on the budget in Minnesota. We've been putting off decisions, doing one-time fixes, and really cutting LGA, now the market value homestead credit, leaving local units of government with no choice but to, in some cases, raise taxes. In terms of the market value homestead credit, local governments didn't raise taxes, but the elimination of that did raise people's property taxes. I think that this is one of those examples
wanna
where
catch
there
you right
are
there,
consequences.
Representative
Let me
Murphy.
just finish. There
Okay,
are
sure.
consequences to the way that we're doing the budget, and they're really impacting middle-class families. Have at it.
Well, I just want to challenge you in two spots.
Yep.
One, Representative Speaker Kelleher had floated this idea as well, elimination of the homestead tax credit. So it wasn't just a Republican issue, correct?
I think that Speaker Kelleher may have floated it, but we didn't pass it.
Right, you didn't pass. I don't know if it came to the floor or amendment, but there was. I remember at the time there was a lot of debate about that, and it was, I think, killed pretty quickly.
We
and
debate
yeah.
issues, and I think that's important, and we have to understand the consequences of those actions before we take the vote.
Well, it occurred to me today on the way, and
Yeah.
you mentioned it because
Yeah.
on the way to this conversation, I was thinking, and this is not for comment, but you can if you want, but I heard today that, I think people were wondering, why are Republicans so upset about the mandate on health insurance? Because it was their idea. In 2005, they floated it. Lugar, all of these Republicans at this, national level supported a mandate. But then when President Obama adopted it, they decided it wasn't their issue anymore. So, just occurred to me that sort of the same things happen down here.
Sometimes.
Well, we have a couple of other things we'll get to quickly, and sorry about that. It was a deviation. Don't make me feel all embarrassed. That's interesting.
We have
but not
nothing to
relevant.
say, yes.
Yeah.
No, just moving on. Representative Lush yesterday introduced the bill, and this is sort of an interesting bill because it made the news last week about requiring people to give their Facebook passwords when they apply for a job. Is this bill going to go anywhere? Is this interesting to either of you?
Well, it's a House bill, so I haven't seen it, but I'm suspecting he didn't require that they give them. I'm suspecting he
Oh, I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
forbid
Yes.
the fact that they would have to give those
Yes.
out. This is a case.
Yeah, that didn't sound like
That doesn't sound like or Representative Lush.
Yeah.
But this is a classic example where our legislation, our laws, are trying to catch up with the advancement in technology. There's all kinds of areas where we're bumping up against laws that were in place for things that worked when the world was the way it was, but technology has changed a lot of things. We're seeing that in some of our education things as well. So this is one more example of
What do you mean, like
the-
cyberbullying and stuff like that?
well, just a lot of areas, whether it be
Okay.
digital learning, how do we do that, online learning, all those type of things, barriers, online learning. Do they have to have a Minnesota teacher's license? All
We
these
took
things.
that out, alternative teacher licensure, right?
We did take that up. I don't know that we actually got into the online part, but the point is our world is expanding, and technology doesn't have geographical barriers, but a lot of our legislation does. And I think this is just one more example of where law is trying to keep up with new technology.
Well,
Representative Murphy, are
yeah.
you familiar with this?
I am
No,
familiar
okay.
with it. I have watched.
Were you a co-sponsor?
No, I'm not a co-sponsor,
No,
but I'm
okay,
thinking
just-
about it, right? And I
Oh,
think
okay.
Representative Liebling signed on to another version of this bill that was introduced last week. I've had the opportunity and the responsibility of hiring in the past, and as an employer, you want to have a good sense of who you are employing
Yeah.
or who you're going to hire, and you are looking for ways to inform yourself on that decision. And because there's so much more information available, you can see employers wanting to get into that space and kind of gobble up the information there to inform themselves about the decision they're going to make. But I don't think that this is a wise move on the part of employers. And if we have to, I think we'll have to legislate to block it. There's got to be a line, right? There's got to be a
Well.
line at which the employers can't cross.
Use your privacy, but but the lie gets all the way around the world before truth has a chance to get its pants on. That whole thing. Somebody posts on your Facebook page, and you're like, "Hey, I
Yeah.
didn't see that. I don't check it every day."
Right.
But.
And I have daughters in college, right? And
So you know how
so
that
I have said 1,000 times to them, you have to be careful and thoughtful about what's going on your Facebook page.
Right.
And they're intellectually aware of that, but they're not experienced in a
Well,
way
they're young.
to be aware about that.
I mean, can you imagine well, you guys probably can, but boy, some of the decisions I made when I was 18, they wouldn't stand up now.
Not us.
So now there's a whole new
There might
business
have been
called,
marijuana involved.
yeah,
Senator.
don't tell me.
I'm not running
TMI,
for office.
TMI. But
just-
now there's these new
I just mean I was
things
at the
called-
concert you were at, and there was all kinds of smoke.
So I think now there's these new companies called Reputation Defender, and
That's
that's their
right.
job. They go online
Oh, the whole
and
cottage
clean up whatever you. So the point is, whatever you put online, you should, in our vernacular of when I was growing up, you should expect to read it on the front page of the paper.
Just to be clear, I never inhaled, actually. Hey, I wanted to touch on
Marty's
a
just
very
gonna
important,
end with light. We're getting all his dirty laundry.
important business, important, not business, but an important debate is taking place in our national discourse, and the media's got to. This is the Trayvon Martin incident that happened, and whether or not Second Amendment's gone too far, and these. Some people call them the shoot first, and some people call them cast or right to defend. Where are you guys at on what happened, and do you think that the laws have maybe gone too far?
Well, it was a tragedy, no matter how you look at it, and your heart goes out for the family and the mother. And I've not been able to follow what all happened in Florida. I'm sure the courts are going to sort that out. And I don't know exactly what the Florida legislation is either. And the issue with guns is that they instill fear in a good number of us. But the guns are kind of these inanimate objects, but it's actually the use of the gun that can be so devastating. And so the challenge is, how to regulate the use of the guns. And
not who can have them, but how you use them. Is that
well,
what you're
I
making
think
a distinction
no.
here?
You certainly want you want to make sure that folks who have them are capable
Well,
and
Zimmerman had
all of
no
that.
criminal record, apparently.
Yeah,
Or I'm
and
not
so
sure.
what happened there? We don't know. I think it's hard to say. But I think the overall, if you're looking at it from a 30,000-foot level, the real issue is that law-abiding citizens obey laws and criminals don't. And so how do we keep guns out of the hands of criminals? I think that's something that we all should want to do and look at ways to do that. And that's kind of the ultimate challenge, I think.
Representative Murphy, I know you're that's particularly sensitive of this issue, or the people that have in
I
general.
think that we would be wise to pause.
Because it almost happened here, right? Let's talk about
Yes.
the governor vetoed.
The governor vetoed the Stand Your Ground piece of legislation here in Minnesota. And that law is not about the instrument, the gun, but about how it's used and the liability for the user, and sort of relaxing the threshold, right? So it's about the person, not about the weapon.
This obligation to retreat would no longer exist.
Right. But, I think Florida, the example of Florida, what's happened to that young boy, this should be a moment for us as people, not to retreat to our political arguments, but instead to pause and think about what happened and why it happened. And then think about the laws that are in place, and if the laws are making that possible, making it easier. Why did Mr. Zimmerman feel afraid? Why did he feel afraid, and why did he act the way he acted? There's a huge consequence for that family, and a boy's life is lost. I think we should pause, reflect, retreat from our political positions, and think about the meaning.
You had one last couple issues, and then we're done. We're
All
running
right.
short on time, so we'll try to get you guys out of here.
Tomorrow, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to wrap up oral arguments related to the Affordable Health Care Act.
Otherwise known as Obamacare.
Yes, it is.
There's a possibility that the individual mandates may be ruled to be unconstitutional. So I want to get your take on what the ramifications would be for the state if the ACA is ruled unconstitutional, Representative Murphy.
I think the question is, will the mandate be upheld or struck down? And if the mandate is struck down, does the rest of the law stand? That's the question they're going to argue tomorrow. Does the rest of the law stand if the court strikes down the mandate? I think that what's at risk if the mandate is struck down are all the insurance protections that come with this law. The end of lifetime limits that are imposed by insurance companies to limit their financial risk, the end of using pre-existing conditions to box people out who are sick. Those insurance provisions, the protections for consumers would likely go away if the individual mandate is struck down. And I've wrestled with my thinking about the mandate and have come to a place to understand that I think it is about fairness and participation in a system that treats everybody. And if we treat everybody who comes to the hospital, I'm a nurse, if the expectation is we're going to treat everybody, then I think the expectation is everybody should chip in. I think that's a fundamental fairness argument, and I hope the court upholds the mandate.
Senator.
Well, we do treat everyone in Minnesota. And so the question, I think, really about this particular legislation, it's kind of ironic in a sense to call it the Affordable Care Act, because all the things that Representative Murphy mentioned are things that drive up cost. And so this is as many things are. It's about who pays for it. And I think that's a lot that's at stake here as well. So I'll be interested to see what the Supreme Court says on this. I do think it's certainly a great departure for the federal government to say everybody has to buy this particular product. So that's kind of a slippery slope and something that I think we need to watch very carefully. However, healthcare is critically important, and it's important. Good healthcare is important to all of us, and so we need to make sure that we have those safety nets in place. And Minnesota is one state that has some of the highest insurance rates, but we also have to look at cost. And I think the real issue with healthcare is cost, and it's cost prohibitive for some. And so I don't know that the so-called Affordable Care Act actually addresses the cost issue.
So when you were saying the things that drive up healthcare, were you referring to what Representative Murphy said about like the end of life limits and those sorts of things?
Oh, I'm
Or
thinking
what's specific?
the things that I think of in the Affordable Care Act that drive up cost are things like the fact that our students can be insured on our policies longer. As a mother of young men in that category, I think that's a great thing. However, it does drive up the cost, and we just have to be upfront about that. So those are some of the cost drivers.
We got a couple of tweet questions here. Is this Twitter questions?
Couple tweets.
Yeah. Where are you guys at on the marriage amendment? We'll start with you quickly. We're running out of time. So.
I supported the marriage amendment. Current law states that marriage is between a man and a woman. The marriage amendment kind of puts that out there for the people of Minnesota to weigh in on. And quite frankly, I have more confidence in the people of Minnesota than I do unelected judges.
I'm strongly opposed to placing what would be a discriminatory provision in our Constitution, and I think two people who are committed to one another and love each other should have access to the legal construct of marriage.
And the other question was along the same lines. Voter ID recently was passed. Another, I guess, thing that we'll all be talking about come November, or at least voting on.
On the ballot now.
On the ballot. Where are you at on that?
I voted for photo ID. Certainly, someone who does not have a photo ID is already disenfranchised in our society, and giving them a photo ID
But
is
not
an
from
added
the right
benefit.
to vote, though. That's a right, not a privilege. How they
No, but I'm
disenfranchise.
saying certainly it makes sense that we have photo ID. We need it for so many other things in life. But the key thing is to make sure that eligible voters can vote. We do not want to disenfranchise any eligible voter. The fact that a photo ID will be provided for those eligible voters who cannot have one is also has the added benefit of helping them not be disenfranchised in a society that requires photo ID for so many things.
Wait a minute now, Senator. I'm not, I'm slow, but I'm
Yes.
not that slow. Now, you just turned that whole thing around. You said, well, if they're they won't be disenfranchised if they have the ID. therefore they can't complain about being disenfranchised
No,
without the ID.
no,
right?
what I'm
Or maybe I
saying, no, I
misunderstood.
think you did
All right,
misunderstand.
probably.
I'm saying that someone who already is in this 21st century and does not have a photo ID is
Oh, I see.
disenfranchised from getting a library card at the Olmsted County,
Yeah.
at the Olmsted
Yeah.
Library. They are disenfranchised from checking out videos, if we do that anymore. I don't even know if that's
Don't
a
even know.
current issue anymore.
Yeah.
But they
I
are
have Netflix.
disenfranchised from,
Go ahead.
from many elements of current society.
Yeah, I understand.
And so, but the key thing is making sure that eligible voters can vote. Those who are not eligible
I see
can't.
your point.
And I would encourage your voters, just a little cross-media pollination here. I would go online, check out the Almanac debate of a few weeks ago with Lucky
Right away.
Rosenblum.
Here comes another
It's
program.
great.
Let's promote Almanac at the camp.
I just
No,
want you to
teasing.
know
It's a
that
great
he
show.
gave a great,
Yeah.
great argument for how
why voter
why
ID
we
should
need
have.
voter ID and how empowering it would have been to his mother
Yeah.
or his grandmother if they had been able to produce that and say, "I'm here and I'm here to vote."
I
So-
just appreciate the irony of not having to show your ID to vote for the ID, because I'd run down to my voting place or bike down there. I never bring anything. I just sign in and
Yes.
vote. So it'll be interesting to have that put out there.
And
represented.
I voted against that constitutional amendment. On the floor of the debate, on the floor of the House was, left me with way more questions than I had answers for. It seems to me that at stake in this is same-day voter registration, and in 2010, around 500,000 Minnesotans went to the polls, registered, and voted. I don't think we should eliminate that feature of our voting process in Minnesota. I think that's important that every legal voter have a chance to vote, and I think that's at stake in this debate. The same thing with vouching. What I'm concerned about is that in search of a problem, this solution is going to disenfranchise legal voters while we hunt for those who may have voted illegally. There was a woman who shared with me her grandmother's document. Her grandmother is 84. She lives in a nursing home in Faribault. Her name is Gloria May. She doesn't have a birth certificate. When she moved to Minnesota, she got a passport, and her older sister, went to the county clerk's office, and they, on a piece of paper, said, this person was born at this place at this time, and the county clerk stamped it. It's got its seal on it yet. I asked the question, how will Gloria May get an ID to vote? And I didn't get any answer. And I don't think she should lose her right to vote, because we're afraid that someone might vote who's not legal. I think we're cutting it too close. I think if we had legislated this instead of putting it into a constitutional amendment, we maybe would have finessed the question in such a way that those who are
I see.
legally entitled to vote could vote. And that's the sacrifice we're
I
making.
need to be perfectly clear. Same-day voter registration, absentee ballots are not at all precluded by the legislation that was passed. However, Representative Murphy is correct, vouching is. So if people think that anyone can show up at the poll with no voter, with no ID, and you should say, oh, I know this person, and
Yeah,
let them
no
vote.
more.
Now that is true. That's really what this whole debate is about. Vouching is eliminated under the legislation that was passed,
I thought
but
the
not
debate-
same-day voter
I
registration
thought
or
the whole
absentee
debate was
ballot.
about an ID and not about vouching. So.
Well, so many tweets in so little time. We don't, any follow-ups to that, Andi Friedel?
No, I think that's all we have time for. We're
Yeah,
getting
we've
the
kept you guys, have been
signal
real
over here.
troopers. Did you hear that
Great.
beep? That's Martin getting
Yes.
get moving now. So you guys have been great to stay extra and give us your thoughts and opinions and your heartfelt.
Sure. Now we have the I-90 corridor get-together tonight, so the day
what's
is
going
not
on
done.
with that?
Yeah.
All the legislators that are in the I-90
Are you-
corridor
Oh,
area
Nice.
will be meeting
It's a little
tonight.
further south.
Yeah.
I could be a part of the I-90 corridor where I grew up in southern Wisconsin. I-90 goes right through
But
Janesville,
not.
Wisconsin.
Okay,
But I'm not going to be going tonight.
right. Well, geez,
This way.
No, we're very nice to have you. I hope you guys will
Thank you.
consider coming back on sometime if we weren't too tough on you.
Absolutely.
Thank
All
you.
right. We
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
it.
Good
Yeah, You
night.
bet. Well, that's it for the program tonight. We had production assistance from Matt Ealing. Andi Friedel is my co-host. We had let's see, who else helps us out on the show? Susan Miracle, Connor Malloy, and our producer, Catherine Loudenslager. I want to thank our guests for joining us tonight. Representative Erin Murphy from St. Paul, Representative Carla Nelson from
Senator
Rochester.
now.
Did I say, sorry.
That's all right.
Senator from Rochester, Carla Nelson. And we'll see you next week. In 2 weeks, don't forget to tune in. Governor Arnie Carlson will be our guest.
Are you guys going to finish by Easter?
That's the plan. We are working on it.
Then.
So, we'll see
Okay,
ya
well, good
for
luck
a
with that.
while.
I see you don't think it's a.
No, I don't.
You're not holding your breath.
We kind of debated that tonight.
Yeah, we had a
earlier.
good
Yeah.
discussion.
How many more weeks? I
We'll
wonder.
ask Arnie Carlson when he comes on the show in 2 weeks. He'll be here to give us his take on all things political up here.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.